Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Click, Brand, and Beyond. I have Nisha with me and I have Shankar with me. Let's get an introduction from Shankar. Shankar, over to you.
Hey Anup, hi Nisha.
Shankar, so good to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here as well. So
So,
Anup
Shankar,
and I know each other for a few years. So I'm based out
Mhm.
of Mumbai and I run my own startup. It's called Krinati and we are a B2B SaaS company in the space what we call as sourcing and procurement. Okay, and it's something very close to me. In fact, this is all practically what I've been doing over the last 2 years or so. And we help companies collaborate better with their suppliers.
Wonderful.
And when I talk to customers, I really tell them that that is the most important thing that they do. Right. So using our solution, they can collaborate with suppliers on qualifying them, getting quotations, comparing, negotiating better prices, etc. So there's a lot of science behind it, but it's something that we just love doing as a team. And we've just been doing it for the last 6 years and enjoying every bit of it.
Oh, it's interesting. So I think, Anoop, today we can go into that, the beyond part of Click Brand and Beyond. And it is wonderful to have somebody who is doing such a special niche thing. But I would be very interested to know how it pans out for Shankar as a founder and as an owner of the business. There's so many things that I would like to touch upon.
me too, me too. There are so many questions that came up as Shankar introduced.
Yeah.
When is a startup not a startup, for example? Nothing to do with his introduction at all, but I picked that word. Beyond that, also, right? Since you're working in this, I would say vendor management, sourcing management is fairly sensitive because a lot of external company relationships come into play. A lot of potential for, let us say, favors exchanging hands and, let's say, preferred partners coming into play and things like that, happens quite often. And we have seen quite a few examples of that. How do you deal with that? That is another thing. Also, you're a software provider and you're primarily working with Indian customers. How does that work?
Let's look forward to this discussion.
Awesome.
So, Shankar, building a business and running a business is, I would say, it's a journey of a lifetime. It is almost it's almost like a tapasya where you're very intentional, focused, and you have to let go of a lot of things, but also grow as a person because otherwise there is no respite. Our egos, our baser emotions, they all come into play. So, my question to you is this: what has been your biggest challenge and then also biggest takeaway in this entire journey up till now?
Okay, great question. So for me as a founder, Nisha, there's a slight difference in that I was a tenured professional before I set up. So
Mm-hmm.
I was not a 26 something who set up their own business. So
Okay.
prior to this, worked for more than 20 years at pretty marquee companies like Mahindra and Mahindra, Siemens, company Ariba. I was the country head for Coupa. And then when I started doing something of my own, it teaches you to be very humble right at the start. Correct. So the way I used to approach a customer earlier and how I used to approach now, there's a big difference in how you even talk to someone, how you address someone, how you state your contracts, how you negotiate contracts. I think that was a very big learning. Did I really have to change a lot of it? Possibly no, but I had to be very, very cognizant of it. So, like they say, where kursi ka khel hai, right? Your chair defines what you
Yeah.
do. So earlier I used to represent these big brands,
Hmm.
and now I'm pretty much representing myself. So I think to take cognizant of that was the step one for me. And then after that, the very space that we operate in, like Anup just alluded to, we are a space where it's all about money, right? So I keep saying that the sourcing process is the most expensive process that any organization has. Correct. So if someone says I've got 2% of my revenue as R&D, technically, other than the employee salaries, everything else is being spent on suppliers. If someone says my marketing budget is 20%, yes, other than the salaries, everything is again being spent on suppliers. And we know that when you're talking to suppliers, everything happens. Some things happen for a reason, some things happen without any reason. So I got to be cognizant of that. And every time we talk about saying that we help you get more savings or we help make the process very transparent, it can be taken in two ways. Right. So am I not transparent today? Are you saying that we don't do a good job? It happens only on this process. So these are two very large learnings that I had to be very, very cognizant of as I start building the business and talk to people.
Must have been interesting because the ego that comes from sitting in that position in the marquee companies and that you described. I mean, all of them are A-rated, the best that India has to offer. And then starting a business where you just become the other person on the table must have been um, a remarkable shift, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm still learning how to do that. Correct. And like I said, entrepreneurship teaches you to be humble. Okay. But at the same time, in a market like India, the C level at least expects you to be very clear in what you are doing.
Yeah.
And they also they don't expect you to be a yes man also. So it's changing. And the old brigade, the new brigade, they want to deal with vendors who are very clear in what they do. They want you to stick to what you say and don't keep singing a different tune every day. So I think some of those learnings help me as well today. Okay. But yeah, it's a learning, like I say, for most startup founders. And when I close a deal sometimes and it's been a very tough deal, I genuinely believe that it's the experience that I had that helped me close it. It was all relating to a lot of experience that I had over the last years in certain situations that helped me close a deal. Much younger, I wouldn't have been able to possibly carry the baton right from the start till the finish.
Yeah, of course, experience counts. And if you're coming from a place of experience and deep experience, not just 5 or 10 years of experience, but deep experience, I think that really does make a lot of difference. And then, in that sense, it is not a startup anymore, but it actually does begin as a full fledged business, so to speak. So, what's your take on this, Anu?
Well, I mean, see, internally, right? I mean, when you're running a company, starting a company, and if you're from a corporate background, suddenly you see that a lot of titles and roles and all these definitions kind of go
Yeah.
out of the window immediately, right? You are the cleaner and you are the CEO at the same time, and you have to kind of juggle a lot of roles. You're not restricted to a certain bracket. Firstly, that has been the experience, right? You have to juggle. So the boundaries are not as crystal clear, and let's say in a larger organization, because the boundaries are made that way. You kind of have to be a lot more fluid, and it's your organization. Somebody falls ill and they are not available. It's your responsibility to ensure that task gets done. Managing people, managing clients, managing your own family and personal life, and you're managing a lot of things when you're running a startup, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, definitely not. And people who expect a steady paycheck, it's not for them either. What I realize is, salary is probably the worst drug in the world.
That's true.
Then comes sugar and all the other hard drugs. I mean, day to day, a lot of us were addicted to salary, and I think that letting go of that addiction, okay, first of the month or last of the month, you're going to get a check or money in your account, disappears after some time. And getting comfortable with that truth is what everything else is aligned towards that. And it's not that you are running a startup and suddenly you say, okay, and I'm not going to get salaries. No, you have to come to that realization, especially if you have some experience in the past. Another thing is how people treat you. I can give you a very simple example, right? When I was in my corporate job, every single day, credit card guys would call me and offer me a new credit card. Every single day, invariably. I left my corporate job, and within 2 months, all those calls dried up. And I really needed credit lines. I needed money to sustain certain things at that point of time. And I started calling banks. Can you give me a credit card? And it was a very weird experience being the somebody doing, and of course you were denied because you're a startup, you're very risky. I'm talking way back. I mean, startup was not a sexy word at that time in India. And you're risky, so they don't offer you any of that. So the relationship metrics change suddenly, and you realize that a lot of the power you derived, a lot of the comforts that you derived were because of your association with a larger brand. When you start your own business, you're a nobody. And that is a very, very humbling experience. I just wanted to touch upon that. But then coming back to working in India with the Indian clients, we are customers and sellers at the same time, right? All of us are. We buy things and we sell things, or services or products or whatever that is. Behavior wise, and I'll direct this to Shankar, behavior wise, what I have noticed is in India, people take a lot of things personally unnecessarily. As in, the personal equations matter a lot more than, well, let us say, working in Europe or US for that matter, where it's cut and dried professional, right? Or Germany, I had the experience of working with a few German clients. Just cut and dried. This is it, get it done, move on, right? Things are as they are stated. There's no subtext behind it. You don't have to read behind it. You don't have to manage the for a lack of a better word, egos of certain people or certain hierarchies and managing and worse is the communication. You have to communicate from everybody from the junior to the topmost, the senior, the CEO, right? And you have to communicate repeatedly because at some point failure happens and the CEO or whoever it is wakes up and asks, why didn't you tell me? Although they never respond, right? So there are dynamics of working with Indian cores, larger cores, that are very unique compared to other countries. And what's been your experience on that, Shankar? Because I'm sure you're dealing with kind of a hierarchy from from the top to the mid level, right? How does that pan out? What's been the experience overall?
So both, right? Officially and personally, right? I think it's more a cultural issue in India. Right from the time we got admission to schools or we take admission for schools for our children, we always stand in queue, right? We try to catch a bus, we stand in queue. So we are always trying to fight for something that should have been just readily available to us, right? But we've always had that. And that comparison that happens with our friends all through our lifetime where we are being compared to everyone else. So I think culturally it states that how am I doing with respect to my peers. And that also goes on to say that when I start a company, I can't fail. What would people think of me if I fail as a founder? So talking about the founder experience, I mean, I did start my company much later in my professional career. I had a lot of, let's say, some amount of wealth built in. So I had a cushion for failure. But it's still, though I may not admit it so openly, but it's still, I don't want to fail. And what would others think of me because I already had some kind of a pedigree and so I can't fail. So that as a founder, that plays on my ego as well. Right. So everything I do and I just can't fail. And we don't give up on some things where I can see some things are not working. I possibly delay a hard decision much later than what I should have done before. So that is very clear as a founder, but a lot of it is culturally driven. On the work front, it's equally important that when we deliver an impact with our software, how is that person perceived? It can really mean so much in India, and this really happens only in India. So, for example, when we deliver savings on any category, ideally there should be a lot of clapping and shabashi given to everyone. But that purchase manager who was there and who's been buying that category over the last 15 years suddenly delivers 15% on savings on that particular category, that person sometimes does not take it well. It again depends on the culture of that company, right? So if the CEO were to call up that guy and tell him, hey, what have you been doing for the last 15 years? 10% you left on the table, it doesn't work well. So we see something good happening, but how we approach it talks about the culture of an organization as well. Correct. So plays to the ego of that person. I have also had cases where before we do a negotiation on our platform, the CEO talks to the supplier and tells them, hey, you've given 100. I want you to give 90 doesn't even make sense. Why would you not give me a 90? I think you really should give it. And that vendor gives a 90 rupees. After that, we negotiate with them. Now that supplier wants to go below 90, but he's committed 90 to the CEO. And he says, now I can't go lower than what would the CEO think. So a lot of these egos are what we see day in, day out in the scope of work that we do. And playing that out, being proactive, telling CEOs how not to do something defines success in a lot of the things that we do. Okay, so being cognizant, like I said, being aware is one of the biggest skills that we need to have as a founder of what can go wrong and trying to put all the checks and balances. So whatever you asked, Anup, is practically playing on my mind every day.
I think, there's an Indian context which I talk about a lot during my consulting assignments is, yes, the fear of failure, fear of, if you are going to harm me is always there when you're getting into a vendor relation. I mean, I will rather hire a McKinsey than, Bangalore consulting company, right? But then, because one is a brand, I am always safer playing with a brand. I can always shift the blame to the brand saying that I hired the best, they screwed up, not my fault. Working with a smaller brand is always risky. But in India, there's another consideration also. Will this make me look foolish? Feel your fear of failure, but in a framed in a different
That's
manner.
true.
Will this make me look foolish? Because it's more than just the fear of failure. Try to understand this. This is the fear of social ridicule. which is driven by ego and all those other things. But in our society, people do ridicule you to your face. They don't spare you, and they are
Correct.
very brutal about it, right?
True.
Everything, dresses to what you eat. I mean, everything is open to judgment. From your relatives to your neighbors, everybody can judge you, which is the reality of collectivist society, right? But that also lends to fear of failure manifesting itself in multiple levels. It's not just failure as failure. It's also the fear of ridicule, the fear of being judged constantly. Oh, you failed in that. Oh, you just got 80% marks. Why? Oh, you only got 99%. Why? Everything is open to judgment. And that's why every single decision is scrutinized multiple times, is rethought multiple times, is re-evaluated multiple times. The person at the top is usually like a deer caught in a headlight. They don't make decisions. They listen to everybody else and then nod their head.
So I agree with what you say, Anu, but I have another alternative point of view. And I think it comes down to having a high agency or a low agency. As a founder, and when we are responsible for all the successes and failures, then we own everything, all the decisions and the responsibilities that come with it, and just taking responsibility of the consequences. So I have seen in my experience, most of the founders, maybe a bit, or business owners who start out, maybe they can be a bit tentative, but I think very quickly they also realize that whatever the consequences, they are going to face it. So that stepping into that higher agency of their own selves comes in very quickly too. So, despite everything that you have mentioned, I have also seen that most of the founders' journey from being a collectivist and listening to the world and responding and reacting to it, or making decisions based on what the world thinks, very quickly transforms into the higher agency, because they are the one who are left cleaning the mess if things fail. So at some point they say, okay, fine, I'm done. I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to bear the consequences. If it's good or the risk that comes with it, they own it, they take it. So that is one thing that happens very, very quickly when somebody is starting their own business. From, I don't know how, from their inside, from their internal motivation, the higher agency kind of just kicks in.
It's more a sense of responsibility that kicks in. You mature very fast and you are suddenly taking decisions that you could have never taken before.
Yeah.
So, and then if you realize that you are responsible for your team's doings, you make sure that the checks and balances are there in how they interact with customers and how they and then for me specifically, again, it's a bootstrapped company, correct? So I'm very careful on where we do. My sense of risk taking with money, without money, has a certain say in how we deliver there as well. But I get that point where the sense of responsibility kicks in so fast. And somewhere for us, we also try and make sure that why is not every employee in my company thinking like me?
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm just doing so much. Why can't anyone else just step up? And when they do, it just gives you that much more pleasure saying that, okay, now here is someone who just thinks like me. But yeah.
Also, there is in North India, we call it Lala types, somebody who owns the company and kind of controls it like a dictator. And everybody has to do their bidding but at the end of the day, and it's coming from a few of my friends who own the businesses, and they say it's the Lala who is paying the salary. Nobody else cares. He has to pay the salary at the end of the month. Of course, he's going to make the decisions and see how the business is run. I think the corporatization happens way later, maybe in the second generation, and if you've worked in corporate before, it is very difficult to kind of adapt that Lala mentality, because in a corporate structure, a lot of people are making a decision because nobody wants to take the ownership.
Yeah, correct. So while everyone can ridicule them, saying that you run a very tight ship and no decisions taken, etc. But the way the so-called Lala companies have a pulse on that organization, it is unmatched.
Yes.
So the Padta system, what we used to call, which is called like a daily balance sheet.
Yep.
And after they implement these so-called SAPs and Oracles, they say, okay, now can I get a daily balance sheet? And you find out it's not that easy anymore. Whereas they had the pulse. So it's the passion that comes in and you feel that I'm responsible. Back to your earlier comment on, I feel responsible for everything I do. So it has to be the way I do it. Okay, so
good
ridicule
and bad.
and respect. Yeah.
Good and
Both.
bad, because Lala type setup also curbs innovation a lot, because the entire thinking is driven top down, right? And also curbs, let's say, decision making, independent decision making thinking. So the growth is limited. It's not as rapid as somebody who corporatizes or has a second layer, third layer, etc. And it is very useful in trade like situations. You can't beat that system in a trading situation where you're buying and selling, whether it's commodities or precious metal or whatever it is, right? Because every single penny matters, every single step matters. So anyway, I do believe, this is a worthy discussion to have further, especially on the structures, the very unique Indian structures which have survived with the test of time, and a lot of businesses which have thrived with that. The interesting point that Shankar made about how managing people, their emotions across the board, from top to bottom, from vendors to the people you are selling, is so important. But in the next episode, and there's the next episode, I would love to discuss, when you are the buyer, how do you behave? Because it's so risky. Let's put ourselves on the other side of the table and see, how that will look in India, in the Indian context, of course. Nisha, any takeaways from this episode before we close this session?
Multiple. And I have always loved founders who have had the risk appetite of building their own business. I think there is nothing more empowering for the individual, for the family, and for the generations to come than owning something. A lot of people, and I think our generation, after the globalization happened in India, that sarkari naukri, government job, the shine faded, and the corporate job was the next big thing. But in either cases, at least in the government job, you had the security of a pension, and it still felt secure. Corporate job was like, okay, you go, you work, and you come back. Yes, you get a good salary, but I have also seen the entire generation left with holding that inflated sense of ego that Shankar mentioned initially, and nothing much. And it takes a lot of strong steel inside you to be able to start building something of your own. And I have so much respect for those people who actually set out to do that. That entire journey and the way we are covering it with Shankar. So I think that is very inspiring.
Thanks, Nisha, for the summary. We will definitely come back with Shankar again for another episode. Till then, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Pleasure
See you
talking to
soon.
both of you.